put this in like a little free library somewhere. Hopefully somebody else reads this and isn't cursed, but like every time I open this book, something terrible would happen. Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about my 2020 reading goals, accomplishing them, what I ended up reading in the year of 2020, and why 2020 was both kind of a successful and an unsuccessful reading year for me. Let me stuck to my lip gloss. I also, I know that I look like my name is Penny Chamberlain right now, or like something insane like that. I'm literally wearing like a fucking satin bow in my hair. This is a wig, by the way. This is not what my hair looks like when it's straightened. But I just sat down at my desk earlier today and I was like, I'm bored. I want to put some makeup on, and I did, and this is what ended up happening. And I have no other explanation other than that. I don't know how well you can see, it's getting kind of dark in here, but I'm wearing like a berry halo eye right now and like a fucking white cable neck turtleneck. I look like I'm going skiing in the French Alps, but I enjoy it. Sometimes bougie is good. Anyways, this is a video where I am going to be talking about all of the books that I read in 2020. My goal at the beginning of 2020 was to read 20 books. No, it was not because it was the year 2020. It was just because, like, I think the year before that I had read 13 in total, and I was like, okay, well, 20 is like the next biggest landmark number, so may as well try and hit that. I did, and then I immediately stopped reading after that. That's because there was a lot of stuff going on in my personal life. I had a family member who ended up contracting COVID, and I have a suppressed immune system, so me and my niece who lives with me had to like leave my house and go find somewhere isolated to stay. Oh yeah, I've had like family members who have been in and out of the hospital. It just was like a really crazy end of the year, and so reading was kind of the last thing on my mind, as much as it was something that really got me through the rough times that I had in the middle of the year. By the end of the year, I just was like so exhausted that the idea of finishing a book like meant nothing to me, really, which is sad because I had a bunch of books that I was like really trying to finish by the end of the year. But I mean, like, if coronavirus and 2020 have taught us anything, it's that time is immaterial, and yesterday, today, and tomorrow are all the same thing. Everything means nothing, and just because I didn't finish reading A Raisin in the Sun last year doesn't mean I won't finish it doing it yesterday. So, like, whatever. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna get started going down the list of books that I read in 2020. Yeah. So I want to quickly count first, because I did reread the Percy Jackson series last year, and I've said that in a couple of my videos, so I won't harp on about it too much, but I want to see how many of them I read. I think it's like literally majority of the books that I read last year. That's embarrassing. That's so embarrassing to me. I read 14 books by Rick Riordan last year out of the 20 books that I read the whole year. And you know what? I don't regret it. It was a very enjoyable time. It was like a nice walk down memory lane. I started the Trials of Apollo series, which I don't think I even knew existed, really, but I really enjoyed it. The Trials of Apollo was a series that I wanted to finish by the end of last year, but then I just like didn't want it to end. So I had the final book, The Tower of Nero, in my library app. I was like listening to it as an audiobook. Most of the books that I read this year I listened to as audiobooks, just because it's easy. But yeah, I listened to it as an audiobook and then just never finished it because I just didn't want the series to be over. And I didn't want to have like no more Percy Jackson books to ever return to. So that is something that is like, I used credit to get it on Audible, so that's something that I I'm going to finish, but who knows when, because I just like, oh, it was so much fun reading that series. I read, and I've talked about this in other videos, but I read the Percy Jackson series proper, which was like fun, walk down memory lane, and then I read the Heroes of Olympus, which I didn't like as much because I feel like Rick Riordan doesn't do third person very well. It just felt like super depersonalized, and like I couldn't really get into the heads of any of the characters in the way that I wanted to. And also, like, the stakes in that series just didn't feel real at all. It essentially, what's happening is that the main characters are demigods. Forgot what the word was. They're demigods from the Roman camp and the Greek camp, Camp Half-Blood, and they come together to fight the Earth Mother, Gia, and her risen again offspring, the giants, who she created to like defeat the Olympians after they overthrew the Titans. And it just was like never threatening to me. Like, I don't know why. Something about Kronos as a threat felt like very real and palpable, but like Gia and the giants just were always like, it's like, it might be because I'm an earth sign. I am a Taurus. I'm burning my birth date candle up there. Any keen observers with a creepy amount of zoom on their computer can figure out what day I was born. But I just like the idea of Mother Earth as a villain in a book, just, I can't buy it. I just can't. I love Mother Earth too much. So yeah, that never really clicked for me. And I didn't love any of the Roman campers that were introduced. Jason was like boring to me, and it felt like Riordan didn't really know what to do with him. I do love Hazel. I do love Hazel Levesque. She's adorable, but she's also black, so she has an advantage in that point. And Frank is fun, but he's dating a 13-year-old and he's 16. I think that's creepy and weird. What else about that series? Oh yeah, and I like don't like Piper. She just like, I don't dislike her. I just don't love her as a character. She's not as anchoring for me as Annabeth is. And I think that series presents something that is like an issue in a lot of 2000s, 2010s YA / like middle grade books, is that there can never be more than one girl, and if there ever is more than one girl, then like they automatically see one another as a threat for romantic attention until otherwise proven. Like, Piper doesn't like Reina Ramirez Arellano, or what's her name, Annabeth, when they first meet, because she's afraid that they're trying to steal her crush Jason away from her. But I just am like, why? Like, why is that the relationship that they have with one another when they first meet? Like, why do they automatically see each other as romantic rivals, as opposed to like, oh hey, you're a girl who's putting her life on the line for the universe, I'm also a girl who's putting her life on the universe. That's crazy that we're both here at the same time. Yeah, so I don't know, that was like present throughout the series, and it made me feel weird and uncomfortable. And also, I like just want Reina Ramirez Arellano and the Hunters of Artemis to be like a little gay, like just a little bit. And Rick Riordan won't give it to me, and he can never be forgiven for that. Next, okay, so outside of Rick Riordan books, I'll go through chronologically. So the first book that I finished in 2020 was Normal People by Sally Rooney, and that came out as a mini-series on Hulu that I think was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was like, every time I finished an episode, I felt like I had like just been birthed out of the womb or something. Like, I just felt covered in amniotic fluid and placenta pieces. Ugh. It's a disgusting metaphor, but it just is like, it just was like such a visceral TV show, and so much of it is like so tight on these people. It's like you can't breathe, within this relationship that they have with one another. But let me run it back. Let me back it up. And tell you the premise of the book. Essentially, Normal People by Sally Rooney is about, oh fuck, what are their names? What are their names? I have it on my shelf right there. I should just go get it. Give me a minute. Okay, I got the book. And I remember what their names are now. I don't remember, I read it. But yes, so the first book that I finished in 2020 is Normal People by Sally Rooney. About two people who live, I think, in Western Ireland, named Connell and Marianne. Connell is the son of Marianne's family's housekeeper, and Marianne is this kind of like old money rich girl from their, I think they live in County Mayo, Ireland, I think. But they kind of start a relationship when they go to high school together. They start a relationship when they're in high school together that nobody knows about. It's completely secret. Well, they think nobody knows about it. And then it tracks their relationship through the rest of their years of college. So they end up both going to Trinity College in Dublin and meeting up again various times throughout their lives. And the book alternates perspectives between Connell and Marianne. So you'll get a few chapters in Marianne's point of view and then a few chapters in Connell's point of view. And this is one that like stayed with me after I finished reading it. It definitely lived in my head rent-free. Miss Sally Rooney most definitely lives in my head rent-free. It just is like, she has all of these turns of phrase in her books that are like, how the fuck did a human person think of this? Like, how did you think to describe something like this? I think I found one. Marianne had the sense that real life is happening somewhere very far away, happening without her, and she didn't know if she would ever find out where it was and become a part of it. She had the feeling in school often, but it wasn't accompanied by any specific images of what real life might look or feel like. All she knew was that when it started, she wouldn't need to imagine it anymore. That is like, this is from the section of the book where Marianne is a teenager, and that is like such a perfect distillation of what it feels like to be a teenager. Just this perpetual sense that life starts at some point in the future. You don't know when, you don't know where, you don't know what it looks like, but whenever it's happening, that's when you'll know. And this isn't a book that is full of plot. I don't think I could tell you 10 things that happen in this book. But the way that Rooney sketches the relationship between Connell and Marianne and how it grows and evolves over the years and how other people come into it and how it's kind of this thing that is like impossible for anybody except for them to understand, but even they don't really understand what's happening, is it's just like so sweet. I don't know if sweet's the right word. It just is like so fascinating to read. And I definitely highly recommend this to anybody who's interested in kind of like cerebral literary fiction. I've heard that like she has 2 books out. So she has Conversations with Friends, her debut novel about a girl and her best friend who kind of get involved in this famous Irish photographer's marriage, and then she has this one, Normal People. And I've heard people say that you either like one or the other, and I really loved both of them. This one did kind of call me out. There's a lot of, if you've ever been in an even like remotely toxic relationship, there's a lot of like things in here that are like, oh fuck, man. But it's also not a hopeless situation in my opinion. Like, I don't think that these characters are consigned to be who they are in this book for the rest of their life. It kind of is a testament to their growth. And so I really enjoyed this one. I gave this 4 stars in my journal. The next book that I read that wasn't a Rick Riordan book was The Farming of Bones by Edwidge Danticat. I read that. not studied abroad, what's the word? I TA'd at the beginning of 2020, so the first semester right before the pandemic happened. I was a TA in an English class. I don't remember. It was either Caribbean women's literature or just Caribbean American literature, but we read a lot of books by women. And one of the books that we read was The Farming of Bones by Edwidge Danticat, which is this book about the Haitian genocide that occurred in the Dominican Republic in the 1930s. I don't remember the exact specific details of it, but there were a lot of Haitian people. There always have been a lot of Haitian people working in Dominican Republic during the 1930s, and when the Trujillo regime took power at that time, you see something kind of similar to what ended up happening in Germany happening in Dominican Republic, which is that Haitians were essentially scapegoated as the reason that the country was having economic, financial problems, whatever, that people couldn't get jobs. They were, like, blamed for every problem that was taking place in Dominican Republic. And, I mean, those countries have had difficult histories with one another for years, like, since time immemorial. So it's, like, been an issue on both sides of that island for a very long time. But in the 30s, when the Trujillo regime took power, essentially people were just murdering Haitian people in the street, and they ordered the mass exodus of Haitian people across the border. And at the border, hundreds, I don't know if it was hundreds of thousands or just thousands of people, but a lot of people lost their lives because there were people waiting for them at the border going from Dominican Republic into Haiti to execute them. And I'm pretty sure that river is called Massacre River. I don't know if that was named before or after the massacre took place, but this book, The Farming of Bones, is essentially a dramatization of that time period in Haitian Dominican history through the point of view of a girl whose name I can't remember, but if I do remember it, I'll put it up on the screen somewhere. And you see her and her relationship with her significant other. She works as a housekeeper in a prominent Dominican family. She's lived in the Dominican Republic her entire life, and she is facing this prejudice, this outright prejudice that she hasn't faced for a very long time. I recommend anything by Edwidge Danticat. All of her books are so fucking sad, like, just painful. But Haitian history is really painful. Dominican history is really painful. Caribbean history in general is really painful. And she doesn't really shy away from any of that pain. So I don't remember a whole bunch about this book, I will be honest, but I do remember that I enjoyed it. I liked the motifs, the metaphors, and it'd be a good book to read even if you weren't reading it for school. I also read Danticat's Brother, I'm Dying in 2019 for a class with the same professor, and that tore me to shreds. It is so beautiful. It's a memoir based off of her losing her uncle who raised her and her father essentially within the same year. And this all, like, when she's found out that she is giving birth to her first child. So it just is, like, gutting. Her writing is so beautiful. I would recommend that you read anything by her. Next. Oh, this is another book that I read for this class. Feeding the Ghost by Fred Degar. This is also about a massacre in the Caribbean. Wouldn't you know? So this is about it's a dramatization of the Zong massacre that took place on the slave ship, the Zong, in, I think it was in the 1800s? Ah, fuck. I don't remember. Did I minor in history? Yes. Do I remember all of these facts? No. But yes, it was a massacre that took place on a slave ship. If you've ever seen the movie Belle, with Gugu Mbatha-Raw, that is it's the story of a woman who was, like, kind of tangentially involved in that, I think, or they like made her be. It doesn't matter. Watch that movie and you'll learn a little bit about the Zong massacre. But essentially, a bunch of enslaved people who were being carried to England, I think. There was like some sort. Oh fuck! I can't remember all of the details. There was some sort of disease that had killed the captain on this ship, and they thought that they weren't going to get their money's worth out of the enslaved people on the boat, so they started throwing people overboard. Sold a bunch of people at port in Jamaica, and then went to England and sold the rest. And it's this horrific thing of like, there was like a court case trying to figure out if it was insurance fraud, because they had also killed enslaved people who weren't ill and claimed them as ill on the insurance form so that they could get money from them. But it's this whole question. It was like a big hallmark in abolitionism, because at the end of the day, these people were people and they were being murdered because they were no longer profitable to the people that had purchased them. So that's really complicated. This again is a book that I don't really remember a lot about, but I do remember that I found it interesting the way that Degas told the story from the perspective of a woman who was enslaved, but also it was really sad. I don't know if I can recommend this one because it's like super duper sad, but if you were at all interested in the history of slavery, the history of the triangular trade, the history of abolition, I would recommend you looking into that one. The next book that I read and finished was Leia on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. I don't remember if I talked about this on my channel before. I have no memory. But I read that over the summer when I was getting back into reading, kind of as like a therapeutic practice for myself, because I was like going through a lot of stuff mentally, and I just needed something light and fluffy to read. This was the perfect antidote for that. I had read Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, really enjoyed it, really liked it, and I bought this book a long time ago. I think I bought it in like 2018 or something, and I just never read it. It was just like sitting on my shelf, and it was a part of my books that I wanted to finish reading because I had bought them but never read them. So I read this. What did I give it? I gave it 3 stars in my journal. It was like fine. It was like fine. The further away I get from reading it, the less I have enjoyed it, but I remember liking it while I was reading it. It just like, the first 75 pages was really difficult for me to get through because Leah is not a likable main character at all. She's rude and she's whiny and she thinks that all of her problems are because of other people. She thinks that she's poor even though her mom is a lawyer. It's all very confusing to me. Yeah, I tried really hard to like this because I really enjoyed Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I didn't like the movie Love, Simon as much as I liked the book because I felt like the book got at some nuances of being a gay teenager in like a post 1992 world better than the movie did. But this, like, okay, so I think my main problem with this book was that it feels like the Leah in this book, Leah, I have no idea, in this book is a completely different person from the one who was in Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. In that book, she has a crush on Nick. She's had a crush on Nick, Simon's best friend, for a really long time. And she's bummed when he starts dating Abby, and that's why she hates Abby. In this book, that's kind of, that whole situation is kind of like retconned, where it's like, she's like, yeah, I used to have a crush on Nick, but that didn't really mean anything, but like it meant a lot to her in Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I don't know. And essentially, I never said what this book is about. This book is essentially about Leah coming out to her friends as bisexual. And she's like in a band with Simon's little sister, and hijinks ensue, I guess. And it's like her struggle to come out even though her best friend is gay. Her love interest in this book is what kept me reading. Now, if you don't want any spoilers, I will put a number here or a tag here somewhere where you can skip to not get spoilers. But I'm going to be talking about the book with spoilers from here on so that I just can get my feelings out. Her love interest in this book is Abby, which would have been amazing if I hadn't spent all of Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda like rooting for Abby and Nick to get together and be together. And I know, like, they're in high school, they can date more than one person, whatever. But I just kind of was like, you're gonna steal your friend's girl after you had a crush on him? What? And the other thing about that, so that's like what kept me reading, was that the love interest in here was Abby. I loved Abby in the first book, and I kind of didn't like Leah because Leah was being mean to Abby for no reason. And I didn't really like Abby in the movie because she's described as having dark brown skin, but then in the movie she is light-skinned. But anyways, so her love interest in this book is Abby, and there's a moment where Abby is talking to her about her sexuality, like kind of trying to come to terms with the feelings that she has for Leah. And she's like, yeah, I think I might be low-key bi. And then Leah's like, low-key bi? You can't be low-key bi. You have to pick one or the other. And like, I don't know about you, but I always thought being bi was about like, you don't have to pick one or the other. That's like specifically what the label is there for, so you don't have to consign yourself to one group or the other. She never apologizes for that, and then they start dating at the end of the book. So it just, I don't know, it was enjoyable for me to read at the time. It did get me back into reading, and it was like a nice fluffy book to ease myself back into it. And I was rooting for Leah and Abby to get together, but it also felt like the story in this, like this book is like 300 pages long or something. Yeah, it's like 325 pages long or something. And it felt like the story either could have been super shorter, or we could have like seen more of the school year. This is like chronicling from the beginning of the school year to prom. Oh, that is the whole school year. Damn, that's crazy. Well, I don't know, man. It wasn't for me. I'm sorry. If you liked Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, if you like this author, read it. This one was not for me. The next book that I read in 2020, this one I ended up DNFing, did not finish this, but it was A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. I won't bang on about this, but essentially it is a Sherlock Holmes reimagining wherein it follows Jamie Watson, the great-grandson of John Watson, and Charlotte Holmes, the great-granddaughter of Sherlock Holmes, and they both end up going to a prep school together in Connecticut and pretty much just like trying to solve the murder of Jamie's roommate because he is the prime suspect. I did not like this book at all. Didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, wasn't fun to read. And for some reason, every time I picked this book up, something bad would happen. Like, every time I picked this book up and tried to finish it, like, something terrible would happen. So finally, in June, I just decided to cut my losses and DNF it. I'm gonna put this in, like, a little free library somewhere. Hopefully somebody else reads this and isn't cursed. But, like, every time I open this book, something terrible would happen. So I stopped reading it at page 122. But, like, I wasn't even really interested in finding out who the murderer of the guy was. I just didn't care. I think in part because I had read the synopsis and thought that both Jamie and Charlotte were girls. And I thought that it was going to be a, like, fun, platonic, like, a platonic investigator and friend story, and then it wasn't, with the barest whisper of a chance of romance in the future. But then it didn't end up being that, And, like, from the beginning of the book, Jamie is, like, really creepily obsessed with Charlotte and, like, in love with her and constantly commenting about how skinny she is, and it was uncomfortable to read. And she's, like, also addicted to drugs, which isn't, like, bad in a protagonist, but it felt to me like Jamie was like, if only I could love her, then she wouldn't be a drug addict anymore. And it's like, it's not how it works, bro. The last thing that I'll say about this is that it felt a lot like John Locke fan fiction, but John was a 16-year-old boy and Sherlock was a 16-year-old girl, and now they could date each other reasonably because they were both, like, teenage and heterosexual. So yeah, I don't ship Sherlock and John Watson. Like, it's not, like, something that really gets me. I don't really get the appeal of it because I think I just, like, don't ship things that aren't canon because I don't like getting my feelings hurt. So it's hard for me to get into a book that is about a ship that I don't care about, following a mystery that I don't care about, and every time I open it, something bad happens in my life, which I do care about. So that's A Study in Charlotte. Didn't end up finishing that, but I did want to mention it in case anybody was interested. It's taking forever. Okay, the next book that I finished was Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I have no words to express how much I love this book. I think this is now my favorite book that I've ever read, which feels super cliche and basic, but also it just is excellent. This book is about a guy named Milkman Dead who is kind of like floating through his life. I think he lives in Ohio or something. He lives in a well-to-do black family in Ohio in like one of the post-Civil War black communities that established itself in the North after slavery. And I think it's like in the 1930s or something. Yes, this takes place in the 1930s, 1940s time period. Oh yeah, so this book is about Milkman Dead, a guy who's kind of like from a well-to-do black family, and he's kind of just like floating around his town, not really knowing what his purpose in life is, going into business with his father because that's just the like next thing for him to do. And then he I actually like don't want to give away what ends up happening because it was so enjoyable for me to find it out myself that I like, if anybody's interested in reading this, I want to leave that for you. But essentially the inciting incident in this book is that a insurance man throws himself off of a hospital building at the same time that Milkman's mother is giving birth to him. And for that reason, for the rest of his life, Milkman is like preoccupied with the idea of flying and is constantly tied to this idea of flying. And I started this book and it was really hard for me to get through because literary fiction is not for me. Like, I don't read David Foster Wallace books for fun. I read them because I've been forced to in a class, you know? And I say that as somebody who has enjoyed his short stories in my time. That one that he wrote about Jeopardy is especially prescient now that King Alex has passed away. But I don't love literary fiction. It's not my favorite. So it was really hard for me to get into this book and get through the first like 70-ish pages. But once I got into it, once I like got into the middle of it, I was like, oh fuck, what's about to happen? Like every... It picks up. Once it picks up, and like every page there's something interesting happening, and if there isn't something interesting happening, there's like a fascinating turn of phrase that she uses. And I honestly feel like Toni Morrison is an author who is not at all overrated. Like, I think she she's so highly rated. I think she might even be underrated. Her books are so good. Her writing is so good. Her characters are so good. And like, this is a plot. I said I don't know how to sum up my feelings about this book. This is a book where a lot of stuff happens, but I could not draw you a plot diagram because so much stuff is happening. And I find that a lot of literary fiction relies solely on the characters and their kind of like boring, I'll say, being honest, lives to drive a lot of the action and interest in the story. And it's more so like a meditation on character and the human condition. This stuff is happening in it, but it's also a meditation on character and the human condition. And that is something that so few renowned authors can say that they do. Write me an interesting book with beautiful writing and complicated, complex characters that also is interesting to read because shit happens in it. That's what Miss Toni Morrison did for me. And for that, I will be eternally thankful. After this, I've read Beloved. So after this, I have Sula, like on an audiobook, but I think I have to just like buy the like physical book again because her sentences are so dense that you have to be able to like go through and read them. There are like pages that I flipped down and sentences that I underlined because I just was like, what the fuck, bro? Like, this is gorgeous writing. Okay, yeah, no. I don't want to pull anything out because I don't want to give anything away. But this is a very good book. Read it if you are at all inclined to literary fiction, or even if you aren't at all inclined to literary fiction and you, a teeny tiny spoiler here, if you like a good heist movie, this is the book for you. The final books that I read in 2020 were also part of a series, like the Rick Riordan books, but I don't have physical copies of them here with me. It was the Crazy Rich Asians series by Kevin Kwan. This was the book series that I never thought that I would like. It, as like a nominal Marxist-Leninist, I don't even know if that's a word that I would use to describe myself. I don't even know if I have a particular political ideology, but I don't like wealth hoarding. It makes me upset to my very core. And the first book in the Crazy Rich Asians series is very much about wealth hoarding. It is like these, so if you've been living under a rock somewhere and don't know what this series is, I'll explain it really quickly. It is essentially this girl named Rachel who meets this guy named Nick. They both teach at NYU, and they meet and they fall in love and they start dating, and Nick invites her back to Singapore for his best friend Colin's wedding. But what he doesn't tell her is that he is the heir apparent to a multi-million-dollar fortune, and Colin Khoo and him are the two most eligible bachelors in Southeast Asia. Sorry, my lip was itchy. Yes, him and Colin are the two most eligible bachelors in Southeast Asia, and with Colin marrying billionaire model / heiress Araminta Lee, Nick is the only guy left available with his kind of money and access. So there are a lot of people who would like to see their relationship fail, including Nick's mother and his super wealthy father's family. So you kind of get a look into the lives of insanely wealthy people, like so wealthy you've never even heard of them wealthy people. And it just was like, at first I was like, this is nasty. Like, I was listening to it on audiobook, and so there would be like pages of him of the author just like dropping names of designers, and the way that he describes characters is often through their clothing. And so if you don't know the designer, you can't like picture the clothing, you won't understand how incredibly wealthy they are. But like, at first I was like, what the fuck, bro? And the other thing is that I want to do a larger video on this series, but I think I want to bring in a friend of mine who is Asian, and it, like, understands the culture a little bit better, because I don't want to be insensitive at all. And also, she's just, like, really smart and has a lot of great things to say. So that's something that I have to plan. But, and so it might end up happening, like, around the time that the second movie gets released. But something that I had a problem with throughout the first book and, like, the first half of the second book was that the author kind of seems like he's villainizing people for wanting money. Rachel is able to marry Nick because she isn't a gold digger, essentially. She doesn't care that he's incredibly wealthy. She doesn't care that he's from this, like, rich, old money Singapore family. She just likes him, which is good, you know. I wouldn't want to marry somebody who's just with me for my money either. But the people who, in the book, who are gold digging are punished, kind of, by the author. Rachel's mom, and this is a spoiler if you haven't read the book, and it's kind of different from the movie, so I'll say it, but, like, know that this is a spoiler. Essentially, Rachel's mom marries a guy because he is a high-up official in the Chinese Communist government, and he has a lot of money and access. She sees his, like, fancy American car. I think it's American, or it might be European, I don't remember. His fancy car and his, like, designer clothes, and he takes her shopping. She falls in love with him based off of that, but then it turns out that he's really abusive, and he makes her do things that she doesn't want to do, and his mom is really horrible to her too, and so she kind of ends up being trapped with this guy, and it's all because she loved him for his money and not his personality. But then so that's her husband, but then Rachel's real father is this guy who saved her from her husband. I don't remember what his name is, but she falls in love with him, they sleep together, she gets pregnant with Rachel, and then manages to escape her abusive husband. But you find out in the second book that Rachel's real father is an insanely wealthy billionaire in China. And so it's like she was punished for falling in love with a guy because of his money, but then ended up with a guy who was rich anyway because she loved him for who he was. And I just, like, if you've been wealthy or rich all your life, that is a very virtuous story. I feel like you would constantly be terrified that people only want to be around you because they see how much money you have, and they want access to the world that you're a part of. But, like, if you even just grew up, like, lower middle class, like, if I met somebody who told me that they were a billionaire and they wanted to marry me, I would be like, yes. And I'm not necessarily going to say I would do it if I didn't love them, but I understand, because I don't think I would. I don't really want to be, like, trapped in a loveless marriage just for money. But I understand people who have that mindset. Like, I'm not going to fault somebody for seeing how little they have and seeing someone with more and thinking, if I attach myself to that person, then I will have access to what they have. It is, like, lecherous behavior, and it's not good to use somebody for their money, but I also understand, like, just like, if you can't even afford a meal, and somebody who has so much wealth and not even just wealth, but access and power in the government in your country comes to you and is like, I think you're beautiful and I love you and I want to buy you designer shoes and clothes, it'd be fucking insane not to, like, take that up, to be like, oh, but I don't love you. Sorry, sir. I don't know you. Like, I don't know. So, and it's a hard line to toe, because I understand people who do have money, like, not wanting to get used and not wanting to be afraid all the time that the relationships that they're forming with people are based solely off of their money. But I also can't necessarily get behind an author punishing people in their fiction for wanting better than what they have. I say all that to say that was my, like, initial issue with this series. But then I read the third book, and this is one of the rare third books in a book series that is, like, better than the first two. It just was like such a perfect way to close out the series. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, you get so much more insight into Nick's family history and his grandmother, who is like, I'm not gonna disrespect her, but she is snooty, I'll say. Snooty. You get like an understanding of his cousin, what's his cousin's name? Astrid. His cousin Astrid and her relationship with her first husband. And I don't know, it just was like, it really just felt like the perfect way to end the series, and it made me end up loving the book series as a whole that much more. So the point that I want to listen to all of the audiobooks like right now. I'm really excited to, and I'm so excited for the second movie to come out to see what they ended up doing with, because they like took some divergences from the first book, so I want to see how those play out in the second book, if that makes sense. Yes, that is all 20 of the books that I read in 2020. I enjoyed some of them. I did not enjoy a couple of them. But I don't know. I think it was a really good reading year for me. I hit my mark of the books that I wanted to read. This year for 2021, I'm upping it by 5 books, because if those last few months of 2020 hadn't been so chaotic, I think I definitely could have squeezed a few more books in there. But like, once I hit my goal, I kind of let myself off the hook because I was going through a lot in my personal life. So for this year, I want to finish 25 books. Am I going to do it? Who knows? Because have I picked up and finished a single book all year? No. Am I going to buy more books? Well, I just got a $30 gift card to a Black-owned bookstore, so yes, I will be buying more books. But I also am like, you know, like I said at the beginning of this, time is nothing. I'll read as much as I read whenever I want to read it. But yeah, so wish me luck on finishing 25 books for 2021. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of them, if you agreed with me, if you disagreed with me, if you couldn't get into them, if you absolutely loved them. Oh yeah, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up down below, and if you liked my face or anything that I had to say today, don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel. I make videos about literally anything I want to. So yeah, until next time, bye!